While visiting a Texas border town in 1932, writer Robert E. Howard would conceive of a new character for the burgeoning pulp magazine market. Now, Howard had had a few earlier successes with characters like Solomon Kane, Bran Mak Morn, and Kull of Atlantis, the latter of which would serve as a progenitor to this new character, a barbarian from the land of Samaria named Conan.
Conan would prove to be a smash hit. 21 stories would appear in the anthology magazine Weird Tales. Howard would be credited with the creation of the genre of fantasy known as swords and sandals fiction.
In 1966, several compilation books of Howard's stories would be compiled and released to the American public. Those books featured cover artwork by an artist named Frank Frazetta. Frazetta's depiction of Conan would go on to become the definitive look for the character.
Conan's popularity would continue to grow in 1970 when Marvel Comics began publishing a comic series adapting Howard's stories. The series, which featured artwork by Barry Windsor Smith, would run for 23 years and even have a black and white magazine spin-off called The Savage Sword of Conan. The success of Marvel Comics is what led producer Dino De Laurentiis to bring Conan to the big screen with 1981's Conan the Barbarian, the first big box office hit for Arnold Schwarzenegger. The film would eventually get a sequel a couple years later, Conan the Destroyer, and that's best left forgotten.
In the early 2000s, Dark Horse Comics acquired publishing rights to Conan, and they would begin reprinting those Marvel comics in volumes called The Chronicles of Conan. Then in 2003, Dark Horse would launch a new series in which Conan's adventures would be covered chronologically. The first volume of these adventures was collected in Conan, the Frost Giant's Daughter, and Other Stories. Now, before a bunch of Howard enthusiasts start jumping on me, yes, I am aware that technically the first Conan story published was called The Phoenix on the Sword. However, that actually takes place at the end of Conan's adventures, where he's become king of the land of Aquilonia by his own hand. Technically, the first story chronologically for Conan is The Frost Giant's Daughter. And with that, let's crack open Dark Horse's Conan Volume 1, The Frost Giant's Daughter, and Other Stories.
A young prince surveys a land newly conquered by his father. The prince has been aloof throughout much of this, which has greatly upset his vizier. The prince points out that this has been the same as previous lands his father has conquered, and now reigns over. It's then that the prince and his vizier are informed of a discovery in some ruins, a hidden chamber containing vast amounts of gold and other assorted jewels. The prince, however, is more fascinated with the room's centerpiece, a toppled statue of some type of warrior. The vizier translates the statue's inscription. The warrior is named Conan, who conquered this land with his bare hands. Wishing to know more, the prince dispatches his vizier to find out as much information on this Conan as he possibly can. Sometime later, the vizier returns with several scrolls. He informs the prince that these scrolls do tell of someone named Conan. However, some scrolls tell of a thief, others of a mercenary, and others still of a warrior. And they've come from various parts of the world, so they could possibly be a same man. But the prince does not care, and the vizier begins reading. Long ago, in the land of Asgard, roving bandits called the Vanir lay waste to a small village. A woman tried to escape the village, only to be cornered by two Vanir. Salvation would arrive in the form of a stranger, who took down those two thugs, and then lay waste to their reinforcements. It's then that the rest of the Vanir are driven off by the arrival of the forces of the village's inhabitants, known as the Aesir. One of the Aesir, named Charl, orders the others to attack the stranger, believing him to be working for the Vanir. The stranger fights off the Aesir, which impresses their leader, Njord. The stranger introduces himself as Conan, a Cimmerian who would never fight along Arnalist scum like the Vanir. The girl Conan saved, who is Henga, Njord's daughter, backs up Conan's story. So Njord invites Conan to dine in the village after the dead are taken care of in a funeral pyre. Conan asks about the pyre, and Njord states the obvious. The tundra is far too hard-scrabbled to bury the dead in, so they have to dispose of them this way. Later, Conan sits at Njord's side during dinner, and Njord inquires why a Cimmerian would venture this far north. Conan replies, he's seeking the land of Hyperborea.
Hyperborea is an ancient land considered to be in the far north that at first appeared in several ancient Greek texts. The land is considered a paradise that is protected from the cold somehow, and its residents are thought to live forever. Other lands that appear in the Conan stories include Conan's homeland of Cimmeria, Aquilonia, where Conan eventually becomes king, Brytheria, and Numidia.
Conan says he first heard of Hyperborea from his grandfather and vowed to visit the northern paradise one day. Njord asks Conan if he could delay his journey a few days to help the Aesir take out the rest of the Vanir. Conan accepts, and later that night sneaks off for a tryst with Henga. The tryst was not so secret, as the next day the other Aesir ribbed Sharl about it. Sharl had been angling to marry Henga. Sharl fumes as Conan leads a scouting expedition and the Aesir head off. Conan's scouting group gets jumped by a group of small Vanir. Conan is the only survivor, but he does take out the Vanir. He then starts to make his way back towards the others, fearing they may have also been ambushed, when a mysterious woman suddenly appears. The woman taunts Conan as she runs away, with Conan in pursuit. Eventually, he pursues her into an icy canyon.
Q Akbar.
The woman calls out her two brothers. It turns out she is Atale, daughter of Ymir, ruler of the Frost Giants. Much to Atale's surprise, Conan makes quick work of her brothers, and Atale starts to flee. Just when Conan lays a hand on her, she calls out to her father and disappears in a flash of light. This causes Conan to fall over the edge of a small cliff. Conan comes to and finds the other Aesir standing around him. They fought off the Vanir ambush, and Conan starts to explain what happens when Gorm, another Aesir scout, realizes the story. Atale is said to lure soldiers from the battlefield to their deaths. The other Aesir play off the story as a mere legend, until Conan discovers that he is still holding Atale's sash.
Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed the lone appearance of the Frost Giant's daughter in The Frost Giant's Daughter. And yes, I'm aware that this is technically called The Frost Giant's Daughter and Other Stories, but still, her appearance seems a tad brief for a title that would seem to indicate she's the main antagonist.
The next day, Sharl silently stews until another trooper named Einar arrives. It's then the two begin plotting. The two continue scheming on through the night and then slip out of the camp to meet with someone. The next day, Sharl approaches Conan and offers to show him a path to Hyperborea after they're finished with the Vanir. It's then that the group comes across the Vanir. The battle barely begins when a terrified Vanir chief named Tyr approaches Njord and offers his life in exchange for his men's. Njord accepts the offer, and the Vanir are taken hostage, just as the Aesir prepare to return home. The group is then jumped by several giant humanoid creatures. It turns out that these are Hyperboreans, and they quickly overwhelm the group. The last thing Conan sees is Sharl and Einar slipping away before he's knocked unconscious. The Hyperboreans then drag Conan and the others away.
Okay, I'm going to use this little interlude to touch on something that maybe is bouncing around in your head. I really don't have any intentions at all at covering the Marvel Comics series, which is collected in the Chronicles of Conan line of comics. It just kind of feels a little repetitive, as a lot of the same material also shows up in the Dark Horse run. And to me, that would be kind of like reviewing Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and then reviewing Gus Van Sant's Reshoot from the late 90s. Yeah, there might be a few cosmetic differences here or there, but it would still be reviewing the exact same story twice.
Conan and the other Aesir are taken to Hyperborea, where they are drugged into servitude and forced to compete in gladiatorial combat. A few times, Conan slips out of the mind control, only to quickly get overwhelmed. When he comes to, Conan finds a Hyperborean slave girl named Isamini standing over him. Isamini gives Conan a special herb to block the Yellow Lotus, the Hyperborean mind control formula. Isamini explains that the Hyperboreans did learn the secret to immortality, but only they know it. Anyone they encounter just gets enslaved. Isamini asks Conan to free her. She's seen him fighting in the gladiatorial arena, and Conan agrees, but he will need more herbs to flee the other Aesir. Isamini promises to get him some more. The next day, Conan plays off being a puppet until an alarm goes off. It's a ritual that the Hyperboreans perform when one of them grows weary of life. Said Hyperborean goes to a chasm known for its high winds and leaps off. Then that Hyperborean slaves are cast off after them. Later, Conan goes to Isamini, who explains what just happened. The slaves are considered extensions of the Hyperboreans, so they too must meet their fate. She then gives Conan some more herbs, and the two seal the deal. The next night, Conan sneaks down into the Hyperborean catacombs to find out some more secrets. What he finds are slaves preparing the bodies of a few Aesir, including Gorm. A strange mist emerges from the bodies, who soon die afterwards. Conan attacks the slaves, and one of them explains that stealing the souls of the people is the key to Hyperborean immortality. Word of Conan's actions make their way to the Hyperborean master of Isamini, Aishitiana. He orders the release of a group of lions. The beasts prove too much for Conan, and he slinks back to Ishamini, who has some news for him. Aishitiana has decided that tomorrow he will cast himself into the chasm. Conan says he needs more herbs to free the Aesir, so Isamini gives him the rest of her supply and prays for success throughout the night. The next day, Conan manages to slip the herbs into the breakfast of the Aesir, and a few hours later, the Aesir regain control of their bodies and join Conan in attacking their guards. The rebels make their way through the city, and Conan splits off from the group just as they start approaching the chasm. However, behind him, the Aesir get overwhelmed. Conan makes his way to the platform and confronts Aishitiana. The Hyperborean easily knocks down Conan with a spell, and then continues towards the chasm. Conan comes to and finds the Aesir and Isamini both being mind-controlled and heading towards the chasm. He valiantly reaches out to stop them, but it's of no use. They head into the chasm and fall to their deaths. Conan then angrily rises to his feet, but rather than confront the Hyperboreans, he leaps off the platform into the chasm. However, Conan isn't falling, he's merely climbing down the wall of the chasm. He finds his way to the bottom, which is covered by the decayed corpses of humans and Hyperboreans that are being eaten by scavenger bugs. He fights the carrion eaters off and locates a dying Njord. With his dying breath, Njord asks Conan to build a pyre. Conan honors the requests and burns the bodies of the Aesir and Isamini. Conan then works his way out of the chasm, but not back into Hyperborea. Instead, Conan ventures into the neighboring land of Brythunia. There, he uses a few gold trinkets to get room and board for the night, and then sets out to find the two who betrayed the Aesir, Sharl and Einar. Conan tracks down Sharl and informs him of the death of the Aesir before killing him. Conan then goes after Einar, who tries to explain that it was all Sharl's idea, and Conan was the only one to be taken hostage, not the Aesir. Conan doesn't care and kills Einar and well. When the village magistrate tries to arrest Conan, the Cimmerian grabs the magistrate and points out what Sharl and Einar did, and that anyone who aided them would meet the same fate. The magistrate stands down and offers Conan free room and board into the night. The next day, Conan leaves to the south in the land of Namidia. He vows never to go north again. His last request is to take the corpses of Sharl and Einar and bury them in the cold, cold ground.
And so concludes the first volume of Dark Horse's Conan run, The Frost Giant's Daughter, and Other Stories. How was it? Well, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really like the framing device with the idea of it kind of being like an oral tradition passed down through the ages and then it being transcribed, you know, kind of like old stories of myth. Also, obviously, the artwork is so top-notch. Carrie Nord is right up there with like some Barry Windsor Smith in terms of drawing barbarians, and it's really fun and really throughout the whole thing. Great characterization for Conan. I mean, if your idea of Conan is, you know, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie or that one that came out a few years ago, yeah, he's not really the monosyllabic beef chunk those movies has depicted him as. He's really a lot more intelligent, and I think this is a great way of presenting him to, for lack of a better term, uninitiated masses. That being said, there's a few drawbacks. Namely, I touched on it earlier, the fact that the Frost Giant's daughter that's in the title really doesn't play a big role in it. In fact, the end of it, where Conan has the sash from the Frost Giant's daughter, goes nowhere. That and the Hyperboreans themselves, they get a little boring. I mean, when they first show up, it's cool that they kind of dominate the Aesir and they just go through everything, and then suddenly they're just aloof morons, and yeah, whatever interest they had quickly fades. But those are kind of trivial nitpicks a little bit. I'm going to give Conan, the Frost Giant's daughter, a B. Now, again, normally this is where I'd select what we're going to do the next time on the Random Trade Review, but as you recall, I held a poll, and those which selected the next 3 episodes, and that second episode has already been selected. So, be here in 2 weeks for episode 52, where we cover Green Arrow, The Sounds of Violence.